church, right on Fairwood Road. There was a family church, and they will help to organize that church. And just recently, we received a 100-year marker, which is right in front of the Texas Historical Marker, which we're very proud of because the church congregation has been in existence over 100 years. So if you should pass down Fairwood Road sometime, you might like to stop and see where this family attended church. And also, I wanted to mention the fact that the early schools were not like your school that you have today. We had no modern facilities, plumbing and whatnot. So we've come a long, long way and, during this time. And at that time, we had the elementary grades here for black children, and then they went to high school in the Galveston area, Central. I taught here in the school system for around 37 years, and probably taught some of your brothers or aunts or whatnot. And I also taught the Mrs. Robinson's children and some of Mrs. Brooks' children and Mr. Kenneth's children. But anyway, I wanted to show you a few things. In 1991, our group got together and decided that we would have a family reunion. And this picture that Miss Brooks has is a picture of the family reunion. And this reunion that we had goes back to those 14 children I was telling you about. My grandfather had. There were 7 boys and 7 girls. And each branch had a different colored shirt for the reunion. And on this shirt, you see, we had the Thomas Caldwell family, and we also have the children here. And those, the people you see on the picture represent the different branches of that family, which was the first black family that moved into Hitchcock, Texas, where we are now. And incidentally, I'm still in Hitchcock. And I probably will leave here, going to heaven or well. But anyway, this is part of that reunion. That everybody's okay. And we also made books, and I have a copy in the library if you're here sometime and you want to read about more about the family and where they moved into. My children graduated from this school system, and daughter Joy, who is now working for J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank in J.P. Morgan in Houston, and in the investment department. And my son Kevin was the first black male valedictorian for this school system in Hitchcock, Texas. And we're very proud of that. And he's doing well now too. Presently, he's at Duke University working on his doctoral degree, and he should have that soon. And he's also a graduate from Stanford Law School. So I'm telling you that to see what you too can do. Because then right in Hitchcock, a lot of great things can happen. Did I cover just right here?
Thank you, covered it beautifully. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
All right.
And now,
Ms. Brooks, before you go any further, the original Lorraine Crosswood School was on Burn Street, not where you're at now. It was on Burn Street.
do you know where
It
the
was
Gold
there
Coast
when I
Christian
started
Church
teaching.
is?
Yeah.
Wife went to
Any of you know
Be
where
like
the
that.
Gold Christian Church is? On Burn Street. Anybody?
Foursquare.
Four Square Church on Burn Street.
That's the location where the...
That was the original school, and the picture she showed you was there. And I think is that building still there?
No.
No, not there. Okay. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Ms. Caldwell.
Uh-huh.
Where exactly is the Butler Ranch? Because, or the land today, did it stretch all the way from League City to Hitchcock?
You know, I really don't know, but I did go to, they had a program there last summer, and the Caldwell family descendants were invited.
Yes.
It's a museum there now. You know, they've taken the building, the family donated the building for a museum. They're a big city, but I'm not sure as to the answer to you. I don't think it came that far.
Not to Hitchcock, it came, probably around Dickinson Bay and all that.
At one time, wasn't it kicked around to call Hitchcock Butler? Because of some property
Well,
being donated by
there was
friends?
a Jonas Butler who was one of the early property owners, and I don't know if he was the same Butler.
I don't know.
Is that, that's what I was wondering,
He
is
owned a lot of
that
property
connected with
here.
the ranch itself?
It could possibly be connected. But I don't know for sure. The lady that would know is not here today, Dorothy.
Yeah, she was.
I wanted to add one other thing I forgot too. My grandfather also worked as a cattleman for Lebo Ranch.
Yeah,
Both.
That was his job.
that was the one who owned the one from Dickinson down this way.
And I'm gonna be the mean
Both.
person that says
Okay,
we
go
have
ahead.
to move on. Okay, now we're presenting the Tackert family, which was, I'm gonna say, the second to first family to be here. There was one before them, a Wine. There were more than that. Yeah, but she's also sort of related to the boys, am I right, John? Yes. Sort of, kind of, okay. But anyway, here she is.
How are you? And I'm not a public speaker, but I'll try my best. Jack and Catherine Tackard were my great-great-grandparents, and they were married and lived in a small town in France. And it was named Beauchamont, is the way I pronounce it. I don't know if that's right. But y'all have heard of Beauchamont Road over there on 519, goes over to Lamar? Well, that was named after that family because they also were one of the early families who came from France to Texas. And in 1840, well, the Tackard, Jack and Catherine had 3 sons, and one was born, George was born in 1826 in France, Henry was born in 1834 in France, and Jack was born in 1836 in France. And in 1844, Henry Castro, are y'all taking Texas history? Are you learning about Henry Castro? He made arrangements with the President of the Republic of Texas to establish a colony on the Medina River, which is west of San Antonio. And he brought a group of families over that wanted to establish a colony. And they named it Castroville. Some of you may know about it. And Jack and Catherine and their 3 sons were one of the rich families who left France by sailboat. And after a rough 3-week voyage, they arrived at Indianola, which was a prominent seaport south of here on the Gulf of Mexico. And later in the 1800s, this port was wiped out by a hurricane. And my great-grandfather, Jack, was 8 years old at the time they came to Texas. And they traveled to Castroville by wagon train, where they only stayed a few years because they had a lot of frontier hardships and Indian problems and drought. So they decided to come back to the coast and they back to Galveston. It was a city and it had some conveniences. The boys grew up and they didn't like city life, so they kind of looked around the mainland and each one of them picked a spot on the mainland to settle. And George and Henry, the 2 oldest, picked some spots near Hall's Bayou, I don't know if you know where that is, south on 2004. And Cloud Bayou is down that way too, and they built their homes and married. But my grandfather liked Highland Bayou. They usually settled on the bayous because they could travel to and from Galveston or the nearest cities, you know, to get supplies and get things and trade. And so he liked Highland Bayou, and he came to settle here, and he married Julia Frederica Jacob, who was the niece of another early settler, and his name was Duquan, his last name was Duquan. And he had cattle on the bayou. He raised cattle in the area. And my great-grandfather got into the ranching business with his wife's uncle. And later on, he became, you know, an independent rancher on his own. And this was probably the first house that he built. And it was up there where, you didn't get a picture of that. You know, on the highway where it says Right My Ranch, back in there, some houses, well, that's where the original home was, and where they established their ranch headquarters.
That
And
was a very flush house for that day, too.
that was,
They were real uptown.
well, Jack and Julia had 7 children, and my grandfather was the 4th child, their 4th child. And he grew up in Hitchcock, and he learned the ranching business. And his family helped establish the Catholic Church here in this area. And he married Virginia Hellwig in 1892. She was the granddaughter of some other early French settlers, Michelle and Virginia DeRue. Y'all heard of DeRue Street over there on 519? They lived in that area. And they had 10 children, and 7 of them were girls. They had 7 girls and 3 boys. And they first lived in this large 2-story house, which was located right uptown where the Deuces Wild is now.
Can you believe something that beautiful was there? Where the Deuces Wild, and we have a picture of that.
And by 1900, they had a son, and their first daughter was born in August of 1900, and she was about a month old when the 1900 hurricane hit. And the hurricane blew the roof off of that big house, and so they were worried about the house falling in on them. So he went out into this big, used to have this hedge, this thicker wild rose hedge that used to grow all over here. And it would be real thick, and you know, they couldn't cut it down, you couldn't kill it. And he chopped back in that hedge with an axe, and they rode out the storm in that hedge because they were afraid the house was going to fall in. But it did, and so they repaired the house, and they lived in and had the rest of their children there. And later on, it was sold to the Chandler family, but that was later in the 1920s. And in the meantime, my grandfather ran a ranching business, and he had many heads of cattle. He had many acres of land. This is like he's saying, some family tree information that don't
Just
show
tell
over.
us how big they were, how much land,
Probably about 12,000 acres.
and tell them where it was.
It probably ran from the Bay Shore to maybe Dickinson Bayou.
So from here to Dickinson.
He had land, and, you know, little by little, he people settled on it and sold off, or they just settled on it and became theirs, you know, or whatever. And so he also was on the school board at one time. I had some copies of some letters from some teachers who were applying to teach school here, and you know, y'all can look at those sometime when you come. This is the house in my great-grandmother, my grandmother's was Jack, my grandfather, was born. He married Virginia Helwig, and she was a descendant of the DeRue family. I told you that. It was right where next to Harold's filling station. Y'all know where that is? Well, it was right behind here. It was right the next lot over on the highway. Now it's out on J Road, yeah. Let's see, he shifted the cattle out. They had, up there on Neville, they moved later out on J Road. And on Neville, they had, where they slaughtered the cattle, you know, and sold the meat. Some of his in-laws were butchers. And, but that ditch that crosses the highway right by the trailer park, the RV park, and the Bostonian motel, that's called the Slaughterhouse Ditch. That's the name of that ditch. Because there was a slaughterhouse on that ditch. And,
I'm gonna rush you.
okay, sorry. Anyway, they had the 10 children, and I told you the story about the 1900 storm. And my mother, that's my mother, was the 5th of their children. And there are 8 children in my family. I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. And they had 34 grandchildren. A lot of them are still in town, and they attend Hitchcock. Some of them attend Hitchcock school. And there's many details about the Taggart family that can be found throughout the last 160 years of Hitchcock's history. And there are probably 250 descendants of Jack and Julia who still live in the Galveston County area. So you probably know some of them. And that's all.
I wish we had more time, because we could go through so much more. Now, the Shancer family, and Ms. Ernestine is going to start. Okay.
My name is Ernestine Shancer. I'm married to Luke Shancer Jr., and this is about his father and his mother. And his father was born in Austria, and his mother was from Poland, and they met on a train. Now, they were going home, and Mr. Shancer was engaged to another lady. He had all these presents for her. Well, by the time they got to their destination, my mother-in-law had all those presents. So anyway, his engagement was arranged marriage by his parents, by the way, which he didn't agree with. And so he and my mother-in-law got married. They came to Galveston in 1914 at the quarantine station. They had to stay there for some time so that they could be sure that they were healthy and weren't having any health problems. So they let them in the country. Okay, they went to Richmond. There, their first child was born, Frank, and he later became a priest. While they were in Richmond, well, the Santa Fe Railroad sent him to Hitchcock. He did not know any English, very few English words. He could speak 4 languages from Europe, but he did not know any English. And so he was sent to Hitchcock, and his first job was to keep the cows off of the railroad tracks because everything was open grazing, and there were no fences at that time. And so he was anxious to get into the
the grocery business, because that's the business that he had had in Europe. And the Brett Boothry grocery store became available, and he bought that. That was